We want to start with breaking news right now at this hour. ABC News learning that India has fired at least 3 missiles into Pakistan. Pakistan's army confirmed which regions were attacked, while India's army released a statement saying that Pakistan is firing back and violating a ceasefire.
Something big is about to happen for all people around the world. India has just fired multiple missiles at Pakistan, and many believe this is the beginning of a conflict that cannot be ignored any longer. What's happening right now could be the ultimate warning sign before everything changes. My brothers and sisters, I come to you today with an urgent report that cannot wait another moment. As missile strikes and military mobilizations sweep across the India-Pakistan border, we're witnessing what many are describing as the most dangerous nuclear standoff since the Cold War. This is not just another regional conflict. This is the fulfillment of warnings that signal we have entered the final countdown before potential nuclear exchange. The world is witnessing a transition into a dangerous new stage, and many remain completely unaware of its global implications.
In Kingston are following this story for us. Gentlemen, good to see you, and also our friend there. Tom, what are we learning about the attack at this hour? We are getting word of some casualties.
Yeah, DeMarco, we're just getting word from the Pakistani government, who says that at least 3 people have been killed, at least 12 injured.
Listen to these reports coming from across South Asia, from Kashmir to Punjab, from Muzaffarabad to Bahawalpur. People are describing them as devastating explosions, destructive missile strikes, and in some cases, attacks that seem to be hitting both military and civilian targets simultaneously. Scientists and military experts are gravely concerned, unable to predict how rapidly this situation could escalate into nuclear confrontation. And in at least 6 documented locations, witnesses report seeing what appears to be mosques and civilian buildings destroyed during these strikes, some even claiming they saw children among the casualties. These are not isolated incidents from unreliable sources. These are mass events with multiple videos, photographs, and credible testimony. Folks, this is not a coincidence that it's happening right now. Don't be fooled. Instead, prepare for what's coming next. Since April 22nd, 2025, when terrorists killed 26 tourists in Pahalgam, the region has been in chaos, and everything is shaking on a massive level. First, we witnessed the shaking in Kashmir when terrorists killed 26 innocent tourists. Then we witnessed the shaking in diplomacy when India suspended the Indus Waters Treaty after 65 years. And after that, we saw how India closed its borders with Pakistan, expelled diplomats, and triggered a humanitarian crisis. Now, once again, this week has started with huge chaos. Not only these missile strikes across Pakistan, but also military mobilizations on a scale very rare in history. It was launched in what India calls Operation Sindoor, targeting what officials call terrorist infrastructure, and affected millions of lives, destroying buildings, creating panic, and leaving Pakistan's leadership scrambling to formulate a response that could lead to further escalation. Show news footage of the aftermath. Breaking news. At least 26 people in Pakistan are dead because of Indian missile strikes on multiple cities. Authorities are saying civilian areas were hit, including mosques, while India claims they only targeted terrorist facilities. This massive military operation reminds me of similar conflicts throughout history, and how all these events are leading us closer to the fulfillment of warnings about nuclear confrontation. But among all these events, one of the most significant aspects is the meaning behind the operation's name itself. India has named this attack Operation Sindoor, a direct reference to the red vermilion powder that married Hindu women wear. This name was chosen because the April 22nd terrorist attack specifically targeted Hindu men, leaving their wives as widows. The symbolism is clear. This is a vengeful response that goes beyond military strategy. Folks, this morning, about 9 different locations were struck by Indian missiles. The targets included cities in Pakistan-administered Kashmir like Muzaffarabad and Kotli, as well as locations in Punjab province such as Bahawalpur, Muridke, and areas near Sialkot. Notice something extraordinary? These strikes went deeper into Pakistani territory than any Indian military action since the 1971 war. This is not random. It is significant because it represents a major escalation that crosses previous boundaries of restraint. We are approaching a pivotal moment that should make every serious observer pause and pay attention. The missile strikes across Pakistan, the mass casualties, the diplomatic breakdowns, the water crisis, these are all pieces in a larger geopolitical picture. These military strikes might seem like conventional warfare to some, but when considered in context with the nuclear capabilities of both nations, they take on profound significance. Both India and Pakistan possess approximately 170 nuclear warheads each, enough to cause millions of deaths and trigger a global nuclear winter that would affect food production worldwide. When we take a step back and view these events together, it becomes clear this is not just a series of isolated happenings. This is a progression, a sequence of developments that could lead to catastrophic consequences if cooler heads don't prevail. The strikes affecting multiple cities simultaneously shows how quickly regional tensions can escalate. In just a few hours, civilians were killed, buildings were destroyed, and diplomatic channels were severed even further. If such devastation can be caused by conventional weapons, what will happen when more significant escalation occurs and nuclear options are considered? The world is not ready, but we must be. The current conflict also echoes historical patterns of escalation between nuclear powers. Although the specifics vary depending on the conflict, the common thread is that conventional warfare between nuclear-armed states creates unpredictable and potentially catastrophic risks. Now, I'm not saying that this current exchange will definitely lead to nuclear conflict, but it reminds us that events like it can and will happen. And when they do, they will not be limited to conventional destruction. They could bring unprecedented devastation, global fallout, and humanitarian crises for those who are unprepared. What about the specific nature of India's Operation Sindoor? Throughout history, nations have often used military action to respond to terrorist attacks. Before the 9/11 response in Afghanistan, there was the Israeli raid on Entebbe. Before the current situation, there was the 2019 Balakot airstrike when India struck Pakistan following the Pulwama attack. Could these strikes be the beginning of something far more devastating than previous conflicts? I believe they could be, and the timing, coinciding with water disputes, suspended treaties, and rising nationalism in both countries, cannot be dismissed as mere chance. What is the real takeaway here? It is not simply to brace for more physical destruction like missile strikes, civilian casualties, or regional instability. The deeper issue is understanding the geopolitical implications. These events are warning signs to the world that we are nearing a dangerous point in international relations, a time when nuclear deterrence will be tested, when countries with nuclear arsenals will have to remain clear-headed despite emotional and political pressure. As Pakistan prepares its response to India's strikes, it is important to remember that the region is undergoing a critical test. Will cooler heads prevail, or will escalation continue until it reaches a point of no return? Folks, India and Pakistan have officially been in a heightened state of tension since April 22nd of this year. But this conflict, this battle, is about to escalate like never before, especially after the major decision by India to launch Operation Sindoor with missile strikes deep inside Pakistani territory. This decision didn't just randomly show up in the headlines. It came shortly after the shocking incident at Pahalgam, where surprisingly 26 innocent tourists were killed in a targeted attack that specifically separated Hindu men from women before executing them. That incident caused tensions to skyrocket across South Asia, forcing India to issue a stern response. So officially, the countdown to potential nuclear confrontation has begun, and it's important to pay attention to every development from this point forward. This isn't just another news cycle or political headline. This is a shift, a turning point. What we are seeing now coming out of India is not just an escalation, it is a signal, and it matches the pattern that many military analysts have been warning about. When India approved the missile strikes on Pakistan, they weren't just responding to a single threat. This wasn't an impulsive decision. This was strategic, deliberate, and even the operation's name, Sindoor, carries deep significance. Sindoor is the red vermilion powder worn by married Hindu women, and this name directly references the widows created when the terrorists specifically targeted Hindu men in the Pahalgam attack. But this also means that the military action that is about to follow will be different. It won't be limited or restrained like past operations. This is a step into a larger conflict, and that should not be taken lightly. The terrorist attack in Pahalgam, where militants reportedly questioned victims about their religious identity before killing them, raised serious concerns within Indian defense circles. For years, India has been facing cross-border terrorism, and patience has finally run out. That failure forced a strategic response, and that response came in the form of missile strikes deep inside Pakistani territory. Now, here's the part most people are missing. This timeline is not just military. It has geopolitical significance that extends far beyond South Asia. The tensions between India and Pakistan go back to the bloody partition of 1947 that created both nations from British India. That division cost over 1 million lives and displaced 15 million people in what remains one of history's largest forced migrations. Since independence, these nuclear powers have fought 4 conventional wars in 1947, 1965, 1971, and 1999. Kashmir remains the flashpoint, a disputed territory both claim as their own. What we are seeing now may very well be the opening movements of a much larger catastrophe. India's Operation Sindoor targeted 9 locations, striking places like Muzaffarabad and Kotli in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, as well as Bahawalpur, Muridke, and areas near Sialkot in Punjab province. According to Indian officials, these sites contained infrastructure of terrorist groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. But Pakistan claims the strikes hit civilian areas, including mosques, killing at least 26 people, including children. I'm not saying this is the final confrontation, but the conditions are alarmingly close. And if we look at the ground reality, things are not normal. Multiple high-level emergency meetings have taken place. Military forces are on highest alert. Diplomatic channels have broken down. When you look at this from a natural lens, it might seem like typical border tensions. But when you consider the strategic implications, especially when they're happening simultaneously with water disputes and economic pressure, it points to something greater at work. Folks, you don't need to be a military analyst to see that the road ahead is dangerous. The decision to strike inside Pakistani territory opens the door for a multi-front war. And this is exactly the type of setup we've seen throughout history, where tension builds and surrounding nations rise up in opposition. This could be the preparation phase for something greater, something that could impact global stability. Let me be absolutely clear about what makes this crisis so dangerous. We're talking about the very real possibility of nuclear weapons being used in combat for the first time since 1945. According to the latest intelligence, Pakistan possesses approximately 170 nuclear warheads, while India maintains around 172. These aren't just the statistics. They represent enough destructive power to kill millions within minutes. What makes this situation particularly perilous is the different nuclear doctrines of these nations. India maintains a no first-use policy, meaning it will only employ nuclear weapons in retaliation for a nuclear attack. However, Pakistan has explicitly refused to adopt such a stance and reserves the right to use nuclear weapons first if it feels existentially threatened. Pakistan has developed the Nasr short-range battlefield nuclear missile with a range of just 70 kilometers, specifically designed as a counter to any large-scale Indian conventional attack. The Pakistani military calculates that these tactical nuclear weapons will deter India from using its conventional superiority. But Indian officials have made it clear they won't respect any distinction between tactical and strategic nuclear weapons. Former Indian officials have warned that any nuclear exchange, once initiated, would swiftly and inexorably escalate to the strategic level. Military strategists have modeled limited nuclear exchanges between these powers, and even the most conservative estimates predict over 20 million immediate casualties from a small regional nuclear war. The subsequent nuclear winter would disrupt global agricultural production, potentially causing widespread famine across the world. But what about us? What does this mean for the average person watching from afar? It means this: stay alert, stay informed, and do not ignore the signs. This isn't just a regional issue. This has global implications. International relations don't unfold in a single day. They unfold in stages. And this stage, with two nuclear powers under multiple layers of attack, from terrorism to water disputes to political pressure, is a clear indication that we're entering a time of greater global instability. Few people understand that at the heart of this conflict lies something even more fundamental than terrorism: water. On April 23rd, India announced it would suspend the Indus Waters Treaty with Pakistan, a 65-year-old agreement that has survived previous wars. The suspension came in direct response to the terrorist attack in Kashmir. Pakistan's prime minister immediately responded with a stark warning that any attempt to stop or divert the flow of water belonging to Pakistan would be considered an act of war. This isn't just political rhetoric. Pakistan's agricultural economy depends heavily on water from rivers that flow from India, with 80% of its irrigated farmland supplied by the Indus system. According to recent reports, India has already reduced water flow through the Chenab River by nearly 90% of the usual volume and begun work to boost reservoir capacity at hydroelectric projects in Kashmir. By weaponizing water resources, India has touched on Pakistan's most fundamental vulnerability: its very ability to feed its population of 240 million people. When military systems fail, when diplomatic channels close, and when essential resources like water become weapons, we are witnessing the perfect storm for unprecedented conflict. This combination of terrorist attacks, military response, water weaponization, and nuclear tensions creates a volatile mix that threatens not just regional, but global stability. The impact of this conflict extends far beyond South Asia. China, with its $65 billion investment in Pakistani infrastructure, has expressed regret over India's military actions. The United States, which has designated India as a major defense partner, faces a diplomatic dilemma in its response. President Trump has called the fighting a shame and said he hopes it ends quickly. Global markets have already responded to the escalation. Oil prices jumped as concerns grew about potential disruptions to Middle Eastern supply routes. Technology companies dependent on India's massive IT sector have seen stock values plummet amid fears of disruption. In the next few weeks, expect more escalations. Don't be surprised if air travel is affected in and out of South Asia. Don't be surprised if cyber attacks or infrastructure failures start coming out of other nations involved. Economic impacts may follow, and alongside that, continued diplomatic breakdowns that seem to defy resolution. The days ahead require clarity and sobriety. This is not a time to panic, but it is a time to be honest about what we're seeing. And the truth is that India and Pakistan are at a turning point, and the world is about to feel the effects of what happens there. Stay alert, stay informed, stay prepared, for this is only the beginning. Now, practically speaking, what should we be doing? First, strengthen your understanding of international affairs. That is an important foundation. If your knowledge is based on headlines or social media, it will not give you the full picture. You need a comprehensive understanding of the historical context, military capabilities, and diplomatic relationships. Second, educate yourself and others on nuclear deterrence and escalation risks. Not to become obsessed with doomsday scenarios, but to understand the gravity of what's at stake and why rational decision-making is crucial. Understanding these dynamics will help you not be swayed by sensationalism or panic when greater events unfold. Third, begin to consider how global conflicts might affect you directly. This does not mean living in fear or going to extremes, but being wise. Understand supply chains, have contingency plans for economic disruptions, recognize how regional conflicts can have global implications, but most importantly, build informational resilience, because no matter how distant a conflict seems, in our interconnected world, the effects can reach anywhere. And lastly, pay attention to diplomatic efforts. Watch for signs of mediation and de-escalation. Observe how international organizations respond. Notice which nations step forward to broker peace and which seem to be fanning the flames of conflict. These missile strikes across Pakistan, diplomatic breakdowns, water disputes, and nuclear tensions, they are all warning signs, calling us to attention. The hour is more serious than most realize, and what happens next will have far-reaching implications for global stability. Stay alert, stay informed, stay level-headed. The situation is more precarious than ever before, and we must be ready for what lies ahead. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains.